Really? Oh, hello.
Yes,
Aha. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Has the telecom started? I cannot hear anything.
Okay, this is Steve Zarchuk from Village of Red Hook.
Oh, hi. This is Andrew Goodwillie from South Nyack.
So is the presentation started, or?
I don't know. I can't hear anything apart from you.
Yeah.
I can see someone's mouse moving around on the screen. Excuse me. I tried joining by telephone, but couldn't hear a thing. So I tried with the WebEx, and I can see someone's screen, and I can see the mouse moving, but I can't hear anything.
Right.
Oh, the screen on the computer just changed, so maybe they're going to start.
No, I think they're going to write us some notes saying, oops.
Right. Oh, yes, Andrew. Okay. Oh, but they need to use a bigger font. We can hear you fine. Steve, what was your last name?
Zarchek.
So for people on the webinar who can hear me, there's also Steve Varchek from Ramapo, and he cannot hear anything either. Call in. Okay, we're being told to call in, so we're going to call in by telephone again.
I called him via the phone.
Oh, you're on the telephone now?
Right.
Okay. Huh. Let me try calling in. I called in twice by phone, but couldn't get anywhere. So let me try again by telephone. Now hold on. Okay.
Okay.
Oh. Oh.
Hello, Andrew. Turn it
Hi.
Good. Can you hear me now? No, we're still connected.
Oh, yes. Now we can hear you.
Yeah. Andrew, I'm so sorry, and I'm sorry to everyone else. We have this very modern, lovely conference phone here, but it's not been helping. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. All right. So can you hear me, Andrew?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
And
so
can you hear Steve, Pat? Steve Varchek?
Pat?
Hi, Steve. Yes, hi.
How you doing? Okay.
Yeah. All right, so we're just going to pass my little humble iPhone around to the different speakers, and hopefully you'll be all set. And I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Sorry about it. So we're just getting started with Jen Metzger. And Jen, I'm going to ask you to take it from the top.
Okay. Okay. You all have received a summary of some of the preliminary findings of our options report, which is really a guide for local governments to help them in decision making when converting to LEDs. And I was just starting to go over some of the major findings regarding the costs and savings of the two main conversion approaches, either upgrading.
Jen, is this the piggyback procurement strategies document?
No, it was what was sent. You sent it yesterday.
It was sent. It was sent yesterday with the agenda. It just said summary of findings.
Draft.
And it said draft on it in big watermark letters.
I can resend it to them.
But we can resend. But can everyone hear me okay? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so one of the biggest findings is that, we looked at the 3 utility service territories in the Mid-Hudson region, NYSEG, ONR, and Central Hudson. And the relative costs and savings of the different conversion approaches differs greatly depending on which utility service territory you're in, and that's because their rates are so different, their choice of fixtures are so different, the inventories of the existing fixtures are so different. Everything is different from one to the other, but across the board, one of the big findings is that the municipal purchase and ownership of the lights and conversion to LEDs results in really huge long-term savings to municipalities. With municipal ownership, local governments will see a 66% reduction in their street lighting bills in Central Hudson service territory, up to a whopping 90% cost reduction in O&R territory, and between a 50 and 60% reduction in street lighting bills in NYSEG territory. This is after you've paid off the cost of purchasing the system and upgrading to LEDs.
So Jen, may I ask, for those big savings, have you broken that out in how much of the savings is gained from purchasing the street lights and how much is gained from switching from the regular street light technology to LED technology?
It is, yes. It was recommended that we take questions later just so that we can get through, because we've got a big crowd. But I will say that, as I was about to say, most of those savings result from just avoiding the cost of renting your fixtures. That's like the biggest savings, is avoiding that cost. But there are significant additional savings from converting to LED streetlights as well. Another, if you are going with the utility LEDs, there will be energy savings just because the technology is so much better. There can be significant savings from 50% to 75% if you go with the utility's current or proposed LED options. But whether that translates into actual financial savings depends, and how much you gain from that depends upon the rates, as well as the stranded costs that each of the utilities charges for converting to their LEDs, the stranded costs of the existing lights that are being replaced. So in the case of O&R territory, their rates are so high, and the energy savings from their choice of LEDs is lower, so municipalities in O&R territory will end up paying more. Their street lighting bills will be higher if they convert to LEDs. In Central Hudson territory, your street lighting bills will go down because the rates for LEDs in most cases, for most replacements, not all of them, but for most, the rates are slightly lower for the LEDs than they are for the existing fixtures. And they also have better sized LEDs in terms of wattages, slightly better than O&R. So there are greater energy savings, so you will see a bill reduction. And in NYSEG territory, their fixture rates for their proposed fixture rates for the LEDs are generally a little higher than the existing fixtures. But when energy savings are taken into account, you see a 10 to 15% annual reduction in street lighting bills. So you will see savings converting to LEDs. This is after you pay off the stranded costs for the existing lights, but the savings are not nearly as great as if you purchase the system and converted to the lights yourself. We found that in many cases, the LED options that the utilities have selected are oversized. The wattages could be lower given the efficacy of today's LED fixtures. So another advantage of upgrading to LEDs on your own, purchasing the system and upgrading on your own, is that you can select more appropriately sized fixtures and achieve even greater energy and financial savings. So I just want to go over some of the payback periods, the comparative payback periods for a municipal purchase and conversion versus a utility-owned conversion. For a municipal purchase of the streetlight system and then a conversion to LEDs, the payback in O&R, Orange and Rockland territory, is approximately 3 years. In Central Hudson territory, it's approximately 3 to 4 years. And in NYSEG territory, it's approximately 5 to 7 years. Again, because their fixture rental costs in NYSEG territory, they have the lowest of the three, and that's why the payback period is longer. For utility-owned conversion, it's just, in our territory, it will always, it's not economical. It will cost you more. In Central Hudson territory, if they have proposed to the Public Service Commission that they do away with the stranded costs charge, and if the Public Service Commission approves that, then there will be immediate savings. I have my doubts that the Public Service Commission is going to approve that, though, because that would be a shifting of the cost from the customer to the rate base, which they frown upon almost always. So in that case, the payback period can be longer, quite a number of years. It could be 6 or 7 years. In NYSEG territory, under a utility-owned conversion, it would be 6 to 12 years if the stranded costs range from $110 to $220. So these are, I just want to emphasize that our findings are based both on the current the current tariffs of Central Hudson and ONR, which both have LED options, and also the proposed LED options of all three utilities have new proposals before the Public Service Commission. So these numbers can change and may change, and we'll keep you updated once the final tariffs are approved. And one second. Thank you.
Do you want to mention the chapters that was attached? You don't have to.
Well, I think we, yeah.
So thank you, Jen. We're going to turn to Jen again in a moment, but I just want to welcome everyone who has joined us here in the office in the last couple minutes. I bet there's some good stories attached to finding parking on the wild streets of Newburgh. So can anyone who joined just now tell us who you are? And I think I know where you're from, but, yes. But tell the rest of the audience, and we're here. You have to speak into my iPhone.
Okay. There are 4 of us who just came in from the town of Red Hook. Robert McKeon is the town supervisor. I'm on the town board.
And you are?
And I'm Harry Colgan. And Danielle down the far end there is from the village of Tivoli, where I happen to live, even though I'm on the town board in the town of Red Hook.
Okay.
And then there's Dennis Collet, who is an activist in the town of Red Hook, and up to his ears in anything electrical.
And I'm
Gail
from the CAC Commission.
And if you couldn't hear it, that's Gail Fulton from the City of Newburgh CAC Committee.
I'm Chris Ekus, Orange County Legislator.
Chris Ekus, Orange County Legislature. Did we miss anyone? Okay. All right. And I just want to remind you folks who are on the phone that we actually can hear you because we tried so hard to unmute you. So please be aware of that if you have noise in the background. All righty. So we did save a whole bunch of time at the end for questions. So do not think we're not going to address your many questions. But just making sure we cover the topics, right? Jen, you were going to also talk about, the purchase of existing lights and the kinds of things that we are helping with.
Great. Okay. So, yeah. So there have been a couple of developments that have made the purchase of the streetlight system, or actually one major development that has made the purchase of the streetlight system easier. In 2015, there was legislation passed at the state level that amended Public Service Commission law, and now the process of purchasing the system and the whole transfer of the system over to municipalities has been standardized and made more transparent. It's in what's called the utility tariff. The tariff is a document that lays out all of the rates and the policies of the utility that have been approved by the Public Service Commission. Before that, when you bought your streetlight system, everything was was basically figured out in a one-on-one negotiation between the municipality and the utility. And the utility obviously has a huge upper hand because it controls information that you don't have. So this was an important development. It also can expedite the process. Some utilities were really dragging out the purchase, and this sets a time frame for the steps to be taken in the purchase process. So we have the options report basically lays out all of the risk, costs, and benefits of a municipal ownership approach to conversion, and also lays out the process, the step-by-step process of purchasing the streetlight system. And so we can share in the next week. I can share that chapter, that draft with you, and we're going to organize calls for each service territory because it is different across service territories, and have a discussion about it, give you a chance to ask any questions about the purchase process. Let's see, and I think that's about it. Right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what we wanted to cover. So again, now.
Oh, actually, I did think of one. If you happen to be in Central Hudson service territory, I know a number of you are from O&R territory, but Central Hudson has a boilerplate purchase agreement. And we assisted the city of Kingston with their negotiation for their recent purchase, and we helped them get some good changes to that agreement. In addition, we had submitted comments to the Public Service Commission proceeding on which laid out the process for purchasing the system in the utility tariffs, and we got some really good changes that essentially prohibits the utility from charging certain fees to municipalities that they had been charging in the past. Those are now eliminated, but we would want to make sure that the current agreement between you and the utility reflects that as well. So we have a Central Hudson agreement that sort of redlines the changes that should be made to your agreement, which we can share with you as well. It's all a negotiation, so you can, of course, negotiate other terms as well that are important to the municipality.
Okay, so I think what we wanted now is to have a few minutes of discussion about the opportunities to work together. So, we've had a number of these meetings. We haven't seen the same folks all the time, but we've basically been in touch with a lot of people by email, over the last year now. And so there is a growing body of familiarity with what we're doing, and we think it would be a great time to explore how you want to proceed as a group of people. So, we were thinking about smaller working groups by utilities. Jen talked about the conference call that we'd like to set up. But now is the time for you to talk for a few minutes about how you envision this, what level of engagement you'd like to make at this point, and barring direct engagement now, what do you need in order to engage more fully? Regarding purchasing of light. Yes, thank you. Yeah, we're going to get on to other topics. But certainly that is, such a big first step for many communities to contemplate, and so we wanted feedback. There's a lot of things that our consortium can do and is very willing to do, but we would like, direction from you all as a steering committee as to what you'd like to see happen. I'm going to put Tom Conrad on the spot because he always has something good to say. Not that we all don't, but he's someone I know I can count on.
Well, this is more. I think Marbletown, where I'm from, is actually in a fairly unique situation because we're only looking at 60 lights, and I think part of the reason, one of our goals here is the Clean Energy Communities Action, as opposed to like Rosendale, which is actually hoping to use the Clean Energy Communities for. So what we're really trying to decide whether or not to go with Central Hudson just because we can get it done. So I think our top priority would be having an agreement that we can sign on to soon, as opposed to having the perfect agreement And then the other option, the other thing we might consider in that case is to keep really small scale and only do some of our lights that aren't already converted under the existing program. Those are sort of things I think, are things we're thinking about as we want to get done.
Can we back up for a minute? I thought we would get into this before we got to this stage.
Tell everybody who you are.
First, I'm George Woodbury, and I've been doing this for 16 years. And I've done over 100 communities in Massachusetts. I'm currently doing 23 communities in Rhode Island. I'm doing the island of Jamaica. I have contracts with Omaha, with Buffalo, 4 communities in Maine. So I've got a lot of experience in helping communities acquire their street lighting assets and then converting them to LEDs and setting up maintenance contracts to service those. And one of the things I've learned is that the idea of a collaborative makes a lot of sense because communities simply don't have people sitting around twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do but to learn how to handle and manage streetlights, to develop the expertise that's necessary to understand how to select the right light for the location, to know what the pricing ought to be, and to understand what the fee should be for the various services that a company might provide to you in the maintenance and service of your streetlights. So lacking that expertise, if you have a collaborative where you could then have a single group of experts, if you will, that do that for you and centrally manage it for you, can save you a lot of headache. The problem with that, of course, is the challenge is that the people that are doing that have to be paid. Now, in Massachusetts, for example, you have the Cape Light Compact, which is headed by Maggie Downey, and it represents the 14 communities on the Cape. And they went out on a single RFP, hired a single contractor, and set it up so that any community could sign on to that program, and it would all be taken care of by the Cape Light Compact. But the Cape Light Compact is funded because under the Massachusetts laws, the money collected through the what you call the benefit services charge that goes to NYSEG or NYPA, NYSERDA to support these programs, that money goes to the Cape Light Compact. And they get to decide how they're going to manage it, how they're going to spend it for their community. So everything that's collected from the ratepayers goes, and they use that to support the staff that's necessary. In Rhode Island, we put together a program called PRISM, the Partnership for Rhode Island Streetlight Management. There's 4 of us that run this program, and it costs, when you think about we got 2 part-time, there's actually 5 of us. There's 3 full-timers and 2 part-timers. About $450,000 a year to support that effort, to have that staff. So where does that money come from? And so this is something you have to think about if you want to centrally manage this, is how do you fund the people, how do you pay for the people that are going to do this on your behalf? But the other benefit of that is you have, in PRISM, you have Jeff Broadhead. In the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Collaborative, here you have Jen, somebody who's expert at dealing with the legislature and with the Public Service Commission and some of the things that the utilities are trying to do under the table to undermine these programs or to get you the things that you want. So you have multiple approaches you can take here. One is that kind of a collaborative. The other is, and I know some of you are ready to go right now, okay? Orangetown is ready to go right now, and we've already helped them develop an RFP, and fortunately in New York you have the ability to piggyback on other people's contracts. Now there's some very old contracts that exist from back when Yonkers did theirs, and people have been piggybacking on that, but from my perspective the expenses there are very high compared to what the current cost should be. And so I think it's worth your while to do a new RFP, get new pricing, so that you're operating under the what current cost should be. Because LED fixtures have gone from $286 to $112 for the lowest grade one. And so you need to take advantage of that. Now there's a couple ways you can do that. What I've recommended to the folks in Orangetown is you do a separate RFP for the procurement of the services, the contractor who's going to do the installation work and all of that, and you purchase the streetlights through an existing state contract in Massachusetts, the FAC 76 contract. The question is whether or not you're allowed to do that. According to Massachusetts, the answer is absolutely. It's a state bid. They went through a formal process. They have approved vendors. You just go to them and you negotiate with that vendor and you purchase your product. I do it a little bit differently because under the rules, I can negotiate with that vendor, but what I do is I negotiate with the manufacturer. And I get the best possible price I can from the manufacturer, and then I go to that approved distributor and I negotiate his margin. So I come to him with the price he's going to pay, and then I get him to agree to a minimum margin, because all he's doing is processing paperwork. He doesn't ever touch the product.
Yeah.
Were you going to get into all of this?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought we were getting ahead of ourselves.
No. But it is next on the agenda following the conclusion of a conversation about how municipalities might want to work together with regard to purchasing the existing streetlight assets. So if we're done with that, if we want to set that conversation aside for the moment, then we are ready to launch into the conversation about procurement of the LED streetlights. And through the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium, this team is funded to support municipalities through an aggregated procurement. In the contract, it was not specified exactly what form that aggregation would take, because our desire was to get some of that guidance from this steering committee about what would be most helpful from your perspective and what is going to best meet the needs of municipalities in the region. And factors that have an impact on that are, how quickly do you want this procurement to take place? How much of it do you want to manage yourselves versus really outsourcing the effort as much as possible? Are you looking for long-term centralized management in addition to the procurement? These are all issues that need to be discussed, and there are different mechanisms that can meet different needs related to that. And so that was, it's just a very quick, incomplete sketch, but that was the attachment that I sent out this morning that lays out a few different approaches that can be taken, which George was referencing in his comments. And those range from piggybacking on an existing contract, which is something obviously that enables you to move forward very quickly, but might not give you the flexibility to structure the transaction exactly the way you might choose to do so, versus another option is doing a new procurement effort with lead municipalities that has a provision that enables the rest of other interested municipalities to piggyback on that contract. That would take a little bit longer. There's the opportunity to design that procurement effort in a way that feels optimal to the group that intends to participate in that. Or the other options that are on the other side of that page are more true aggregated or aggregation efforts. And these are the models that George was referencing with the Cape Light contract, for instance, the first one here, which is sort of a contractual aggregation, would involve working through an existing entity rather than creating a new institution to provide the services, but would involve a lot of work in advance to determine who was interested in participating, what their needs were, and then structuring that aggregated procurement. And then the final option which is listed, is more of an institutional aggregation effort, which involves creating a new entity that would provide these services to its members on a long-term basis. All the maintenance, all replacement life, et cetera. And that is something that is the most comprehensive in terms of the services that are provided. That also is a much more extensive effort to organize, and the long-term services that would be provided are something that are outside of the immediate bounds of this Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium. So if there were interest in that, that would be a new effort to sort of add on to this contract. And yeah.
Actually, I mean, you know, this seems like deja vu all over again. We've had these meetings in different locations in Scarsdale and, you know, in Kingston, and now we're having another one yet here. And I think from a municipality standpoint, I think everybody's eager to try to reap the benefits of and the rewards for conversion, streetlight conversion, whatever reason, whether it's CEC certification, whether it's, you know, save a few bucks for the residents, whether it's lowering greenhouse gases. We got to cut to the chase. George is really at the point where I want to be, which is, you know, there's a logistics and approach that we have to take. Step one is, for example, identifying the contractor that would be doing operations and maintenance or installation. Because you can't go back to the municipality and say, well, we're thinking of doing this. What we have to do is come back with a budget that's appropriate. We have to come back with a cost case that says, this is how it's going to be done. These are the people who are going to be handling it. I need a list of the stakeholders in order for me to understand whether or not it's something that is reasonable for the community to be able to agree on. You know, I'm not sure where we are. George, were you suggesting that there was a contractor in the wings here ready to deal, for example, negotiating a contract with Central Hudson? Because I know in a previous conversation, their cost is in Central Hudson is $234 per fixture to purchase to do the buyback for the. That's not going to change. Well, except that George was pointing out that they have to disclose what their assets are, they're valued at as part of their tax burden, right, as Central Hudson. If that's open source, then there's a challenge that could be made in terms of that pricing as well, right? I mean, that was, George, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that was you had done that or had worked on, or some community had already. Amherst, okay.
The city of Kingston had looked into that and found and didn't see much of a discrepancy. The issue for Central Hudson, the way they do it makes it's not helpful from a municipal perspective. What they do is they calculate that value on a mass plant basis. They have a line, you know, in their books that says street lighting has this much value on their book. They have that, and in the world of utility regulation, they have to make those books balance, right? And they have to be made whole through the sale. Otherwise, those costs are passed on to the ratepayers. So what they have done is taken that single value, they have divided it by the number of streetlights to get an average streetlight cost. They have taken that sum and divided it in half and arbitrarily said, you know, so it's $234 in total. $117 is for the armature and $117 is for the light. It's totally arbitrary. It has nothing to do with the actual fixtures that you have in your town. But this is the way they do it, and they get to call the shots, and that is that's in this, that's part of what's been approved.
The question that a community has to ask itself is, let's say that they come back to you and the purchase price is $435,000, and you want to fight that, and it's going to be a 2-year effort, and it costs you $125,000 in legal fees, and you're going to lose $60,000 a year in savings.
And they won't maintain their lights that go out
during that. Well, they may or may not. But so from my perspective, I'm not a lawyer who likes to see how much I can get paid over 2 years. I'm an engineer. I like to look at what the balance sheet looks like. And what I want to do, though, is to make sure the agreement I sign with them, if they're ever taken to task over how they did this and it gets altered and it would benefit me, that I get to retroactively benefit from the change. But what I want to do is I want to get to the savings as soon as possible and deal with that issue later. And what we have found in our studies is that the payback on this is so high. It's unfortunate that you're paying what you are, but you're better off just biting the bullet and doing it and moving forward.
And there's not, and it will be the municipality that engages in the with Central Hudson.
You know, I'm serve as an expert witness in these rate cases, and I will tell you what the utilities will do is they'll say, well, we think the street lights are going to last 20 years. And 10 years into their life, and they've been collecting depreciation based on a 20-year depreciation schedule. 10 years into their life, they do a rate case study, and they do an analysis, and oh, well, we think these are going to actually last 30 years. So they're going to last another 20 years, so we're going to set up a new depreciation which extends the depreciation out over 20 years, but they've already collected half the value of the asset, and you don't get credit for that. So the fact of the matter is, most of these assets have been fully paid for, and you're still paying for them.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. True.
If I could add, and I'm not sure if it's really my place to add in this because I'm a coordinator for the Clean Energy Communities program, and you know, we don't have the same leg in the game that all of you who are from municipalities do. But in my team's conversations with many municipalities throughout the Mid-Hudson region, what we hear is that there is a strong interest in moving forward with this as quickly as possible, and an interest in purchasing their lights, and there is a great concern and fear over the negotiation. So I'm not sure if that even adds anything, but we hear that over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's going to be different in different service territories. It definitely is. But we have been involved with Orangetown through Orangetown's purchase of its streetlight system, and we can provide theirs. Looks pretty much like a boilerplate document as well. So we can give some advice on how to improve that contract. NYSEG, we don't have any examples of agreements that have been reached for the purchase of lights in NYSEG territory. I don't think that there are any munis here in NYSEG of one. Okay. So unfortunately, we're not in a position to really do the same thing. But I will let you. I just want to say in both NYSEG and all three service territories, all three utilities use an entirely different methodology for determining the purchase price of the system. They're all different. One's replacement value, one's net present value. Wait, what's NYSEG's? It's basically NYSEG looks at if we owned the system, continued to own the system, how much would we earn, and therefore, what do we lose from it if we sell it? They take that into account. They're all different. So, but NYSEG and ONR actually do take into account your existing inventory, the actual lights that are in your municipality. They know when they were installed, theoretically, and we can talk about billing audit in a minute, but they are based or or incorporate the actual undepreciated value of the existing lights. And the cost, the buyback cost in O&R territory and in 2 NYSEG communities way upstate were lower than Central Hudson's. And O&R's was significantly lower than Central Hudson. So there's no question that in O&R territory, you should purchase your streetlight system, because if you want to convert, you'll be paying, you won't be getting great LED options if you stay with the utility, and you'll be paying more, you know. So the economics are pretty clear in O&R territory. Wait, this one.
So when Jen sent out the draft chapters of the options report, it explores these issues in detail for each of the utility service territories. So there's really valuable information to guide municipalities there. And because, as Jen was saying, the situation is so different in each utility service territory, we think it's going to be really valuable to set up these conference calls with municipalities by utility service territory after you have had the chance to read Jen's options report chapters that address these issues. And then you'll all be able to share the information that you receive from the utility in your municipality. You'll be able to, we'll help you strategize how to move forward together in order to make it less of a daunting prospect.
A question on that. So, I mean, it sounds to me like it makes the most sense for those of us in the Central Hudson territory band together to obviously talk about moving forward as in the buyback process. But so the $234 price tag per fixture, is that standard across the entire service area, or is that differing from Dutchess to okay? Yeah. So is it also something that we should be thinking about where is it possible to do like an aggregated negotiation among all of the different municipalities, or is that really not an option?
So the Public Service Commission, these agreements are between the customer and the utility. And it's really, you know, if the utility doesn't really have an interest in that. So, and we don't have a say over that. And ultimately, the Public Service Commission has to approve the sale, which it will, but that takes some time. But in Central Hudson Service Territory, I don't have huge concern with the agreement. The changes that were made with Kingston are changes that you should seek, but you know, it's a known quantity. It's a very known quantity, and I'm happy to share with you that agreement, the redlined agreement now. I can send it with the chapter so you can see what it looks like. It's not really, I think, the worry. It sounds scarier than it is negotiating with the utility, but we have information, and information is power. So,
can I ask a question about the different fixtures? So a lot of our fixtures are on poles. We continue to rent the pole. Is that what happens? And the ones that aren't on utility poles but are on standalone posts, would we then own the post too?
Yeah. So if the utilities, if you rent the pole,
which we would have to if we owned the fixture. So now Central Hudson owns the pole and the fixture?
Yeah. So when you purchase,
you don't rent the pole. The utility continues to own the pole.
Right.
And maintain the pole. All you're doing is paying for the energy that's consumed by the light on the pole. All right.
So you pay. It's called pole attachment fee.
Right.
And there are pole attachment fees in just NYSEG territory, not in O&R territory. And I think at least one municipality way upstate in NYSEG territory purchased a pole. So I don't know if that's an option necessarily for all NYSEG communities, but there is a full attachment fee in Central Hudson. The fee for 28, I think it's 2017, it's July 2017 or July 2018 is $7 per pole. So that's going to be a cost. But again, in the analysis, you know, there's the chapter of the options report that does the cost analysis takes all of these little costs into account. In NYSEG and ONR territory, not in Central Hudson territory, but NYSEG and ONR, when you take over ownership of your streetlights, you have to install an inline disconnect fuse on each light. That's a cost. But all of these costs are factored into the cost analysis, so you'll see what the payback periods are, what the costs are being approximately. Just so everybody's clear, the cost analysis is based on, we had for the entire service territory, for each of these utilities, we had all of the lights they have, all of the types, all of the sizes, and we created a 100-light representative sample. And that's what we did the cost analysis on. Each municipality is going to have a slightly different inventory. Some might have more mercury vapor fixtures, which, you know, use much more energy, and it's going to be different, but it'll give you a really good idea of what the cost and savings are. So
keep in mind, from the utility's perspective, they don't want one-off contracts with every community. That everyone's different. They want a standardized agreement. They want it to be the same with every community. So in answer to your question, yes, we should negotiate the terms of those agreements, but once it's settled, it's settled. Now, I've done this Lord knows how many times. And one of the things you have to do is you have to weigh the value of what you're asking for. There are things in the agreement that I absolutely disagree with, but the risk associated with that language is so small that I'm willing to give that to the utility. I'm willing to accept that. There are others where the risks are very high and I'm not willing to accept that. So that's the balance you strike in these negotiations. The business of toll attachment fees has been defeated in every case in every state where it's been addressed, except in New York, because the cost of that toll is embedded in the electricity charges they charge you. So they are double charging you. It's appropriate if you're the cable company that doesn't use electricity and you want to attach to the pole. How do they recover a fair share of the cost of that pole and the maintenance of that pole from the cable company? The only way they can do it is through an attachment fee. But for a street light, you're occupying space that's dedicated to street lights, and you're paying them for electricity, which has the cost of the pole embedded in it. So this has been defeated, as I said, every time I've addressed it before any commission. And eventually it should be defeated in New York, but somebody's going to have to take the case.
So we have not much time left for this morning's meeting, but once you all have reviewed those chapters on the purchase process and everything, we'll have follow-up calls and we can answer those questions. But we want to just make sure we get to everything else. Our sort of last grouping of agenda items, procurement of LED streetlights. We want to emphasize that it's really, how many of your communities have undertaken a billing audit, an audit of your bills, of your streetlight bills? Bethel has. Okay, so this is something you should do like immediately. The utilities are horrible record keepers of their streetlights. Your lights are old. There have been many changes over time. They've upgraded and not necessarily recorded the changes. They've changed the wattages. They haven't necessarily recorded it. Some lights are no longer there, but you're still getting billed for them. This is like routine. And we had a company called, well, Tom did it in Marbletown. They did it. Their volunteers did their own field evaluation. Oh, and your DP, okay. So we should
I mean, the Central Hudson claims that information is useless to them.
So you can't get refunded for are lights that have just been out and have not been serviced because there's no documentation of that. But still, there's plenty of other room for errors that can be documented. And we use a company called Computel, which is a professional auditor and billing auditor, and there's no upfront cost to you at all. They take basically commission out of any overbilling. Okay, so Rosendale, so I'm also on the town council in Rosendale, and we just got a check from Central, well, I should say, we got a check, but we have to pay some of it, 40% to Computel. But they found $30,000 we only have 190 lights, okay? $30,000 in mistakes. And statutorily, they can only go back 6 years. So the utility gets to keep all of those wonderful over-earnings from before 6 years, beyond 6 years. But in 6 years, it's a lot of money. And they have found, I haven't committed it to memory, actually, I have to look it up. But so for Rosendale, they were a pain. I don't know why, but Central Hudson was a pain, and it took longer than necessary. It took us, I think, like 5 months, but 3 to 4 months it takes typically. So they have found in NYSEG is the biggest offender, which makes total sense because they have 86,000 lights across the state. Their territory is everywhere. Refunds have been as big as $100,000. Central Hudson territory refunds have been as big as $75,000, and in O&R territory, $25,000. So O&R does a better job of keeping its inventory, but still, there are overbilling opportunities. So we can connect you with, there are a couple of companies that do it actually.
Yeah, the other one being Troy and Banks.
Yeah.
Everything that Jen has said is on our website, which the website's on the back of your agenda.
And if I could just say one thing, it's very important to do that billing audit before you undertake the LED conversion, because once the municipality or a contractor changes the inventory of streetlights, there's no longer the ability to go back and make claims for overbilling in the past.
So it can affect your purchase price. Time that properly. It can affect your purchase price if you're paying for lights that you don't have.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I did this personally, and we found 3 out of 8 floor lights that claim we have, but simply either did not exist or which were actually owned by private individuals. The private corporations had parking lights. The private corporations had parking lot lights that they were paying for, but we were paying for them as well. So, that's like 4% of our lights were just non-existent.
Sure. So I think in our imperfect way, we are able to take questions from our patient 14 people on the phone and on the webinar. Does anyone who's on the phone want to ask a question as we close this, get into the final part of the meeting? I don't think they're silent.
So this is Andrew Goodwillie from the Village of South Nag, and I just want to get back to the point of how would municipalities want to work together, and the idea to have O&R-based discussions would be very helpful, I think, for my community.
Mm-hmm. Great. So that's the direction we're going in. Yeah, the direction. Good. Anyone else out there in phone land and WebEx land?
This is Steve Zarchuk.
Yes.
On your poll attachment for Central Hudson, it got a little garbled right there. What the cost was?
I believe the 2017 to 2018 charge is $7 per poll.
Per year?
Is that
per year?
Per year?
Yeah, per year.
Okay, thank you.
It's in the report. It's in the chapter that you'll be getting next week of the options report.
All right. Yes.
back on one thing, because Tivoli also did its own crowdsourced flight assessment where we all walked around and all that stuff, and we found a lot of discrepancies. And that was right around the time that the consortium was being formed, so we sort of held off. We held off on doing anything with Central Hudson. It was also impossible for us to get anybody from Central Hudson to talk to us about these discrepancies. So we thought, well, we'll just wait for a little while. Now, we have all this information, right? But what I'm hearing from you is we should do a formal audit because we need the dollar value attached to what these discrepancies are before we move forward. So should we all agree as a no?
Well, we didn't. I mean,
but what I'm hearing from Jen and from Pat, right, because you're saying this has a bearing on what the cost potential. All right.
Potentially, but I do want to just one note about the, you know, Rosendale. I led an assessment for Rosendale as chair of their Conservation Advisory Council in 2013. We did a field assessment. What the discrepancies that Computel found were not discrepancies we could find. There was an issue with polls that we wouldn't have even known about. Like there were all these polls that we were being billed for apparently that we shouldn't have been billed for, but we wouldn't have seen that in our field audit. And that was where most of our refund came from. So just a cautionary tale about if you can find things doing it yourself, and Marbletown did, but also the company, when you hire a consultant, they're professionals. They were able to get us an actual check. Right. Your negotiations, you know, they got to bill credit, which is good too, but different. So, you know, you have to weigh those.
I'd like to jump in. I think since you have this information, you should approach Central Hudson and say, this is wrong, we want a refund, and then get the formal audit so they don't take 40% of the stuff you've already found, but find the rest of the stuff.
Right. I guess my impression after having compiled all this information and having wandered around looking at like serial numbers and they don't match and all this stuff, you're like, whoa, there's clearly stuff in here where we don't even know what we're looking for. So, I mean, yes, on the one hand, we have compiled a bunch of things, and maybe that's where we can negotiate a different rate or a commission for the stuff because we've already done the wandering around. But
you said no.
Okay. I mean, but this is a question that I have. I mean, I don't have an answer for this. I'm asking the question to our esteemed experts here. What would you recommend? Because it sounds to me like, you know, in an effort to move everybody at this table forward, if we all agree to do the bill audit, then everybody will have the information that we need. Like, for instance, if we're going to sort of break out with the Central Hudson region, and we all know that everybody who's participating has done the bill audit, and we can kind of look at all the numbers and look at everything that's on the table, does that put us in a better position to come up with the purchase agreement that we all want to agree on and present to Central Hudson?
No,
okay.
It's not. And in fact, something, you know, you're all going to be doing things at different rates. You know, you're going to be purchasing your systems at different rates from the utilities. You're going to be doing, but that doesn't necessarily affect the actual aggregated purchase or procurement contract that you get. You can still actually implement that contract in your time. Then, so don't feel like that it's never going to happen, that every single municipality is going to be in lockstep on each step of the process. And, you know, the PSC approval of your agreement could take different amounts of time. So don't feel that pressure, I would say.
A couple other points. The Computel audit, though, is a different type of an audit. It's a paper audit that determines billing discrepancies. You also need an audit of the fixtures, where they're located, what their wattages are, how high off the street they are, what the nature of the roadway is, and that sort of thing, because that helps you decide what LED needs to be there. And we are putting together a field guide for how to do that, and then you can use what's called ArcView Collector, which is a free app that you can put on an iPad, and you can go around and capture all this information, and we have drop-down menus that work with it to pick up the different information that you need to do an audit.
It'd be hard for Newburgh.
Now,
it wouldn't work for Newburgh, but
why not?
we have 1,000 lights. DPW, we had to pay literally $10,000 in overtime to have them.
Well, but the fact is, I audited 17,000 streetlights in the city of Providence, and I hired 5 people that we trained to do this, and we paid them X dollars per light to do it. The total cost to do 17,000 lights for the city of Providence was $190,000, about $8 per light. So, you know, professional firms do this for anywhere from $12 to $25 a light. But, you know, what we want to try to do is to at least help you know what you need to do if you're going to do this and what to look for. I mean, there's a tag on every light that tells you what the wattage is and what type of fixture it is. You need to know what that tag means.
And I would say for a city with a lot of lights, most municipalities have a couple hundred or less.
Yeah, let me give you.
So if you have there are other options for doing an audit other than just doing it in-house. You can hire somebody to do it. You can also write it as a specification in your RFP that this is done and what exactly you want done. You know, so there are different ways to get that done.
And I'd like to suggest that for those who are pursuing the Clean Energy Community Program, that can be your project, your grant application project. You could get designation with four of the other high impact actions and the money that you could get for a project like that.
Yeah, let me give you an example. We audited the town of Ulster with 371 streetlights. And what I did was I then took a look at what would happen if you did just a one-for-one replacement. If it's a 50-watt high-pressure sodium, I'm going to put in a 20-watt LED, and so on and so forth. And I costed that out. And then I looked at, and I have a list of every street in the town and the different wattages on the street, and then I classified the streets as to whether they were arterials, collectors, or whatever. And I said, okay, this is the way each street ought to be lit, and I made it uniform so that when I was done, I only had three different wattages of fixtures throughout the whole town. What happened was the project cost went from $10,618 down to $8,726, which paid for the audit. And the annual savings went up, so that, you know, the audit was paid for through the redesign. It's about a 19 to 20% savings. And then you benefited from it year over year because of the reduced wattage consumption.
Right. The higher the wattage, the fixtures, the more expensive they are.
Now, in terms of the aggregation, I know some of you want to go quickly. And I think the answer to that is we've got a couple communities that are absolutely ready to go out with an RFP right now to secure a contractor. I don't know what the rules are in New York. In Massachusetts, as long as that contract says on behalf of the town of Orangetown and the other member communities of the MHSD, anybody can then piggyback on it. So what we ought to do is make a decision we want to do that so that that becomes available to everybody. And it's, you know, if you look at the prison program in Rhode Island, we started that last year. And we finished the city of Providence's lights. We're just now getting the data from the utilities for 5 other communities. Those will be starting soon. But this is going to go on for 3 or 4 years. So while we're in the business of getting the preferred contractor set up, establishing the prices you all, and what happens is there'll be a long process of getting you converted to the LEDs. And what happens when you convert to LEDs is your maintenance costs go down so dramatically that you're better off with a time and materials contract than a fixed cost per light per month. And so what happens is this thing's going to drag out over about a year. You all have plenty of time to figure out during that year how you want to organize yourself and how you want to manage this. But in the meantime, we can get the projects moving, get the lights converted, and get people to the savings while you're doing the administrative part.
And George, when you say how you want to organize yourself, you mean for the long-term maintenance of the system rather than for the procurement and the conversion.
Right. But I'm just...
organization as well for the procurement early on. Shouldn't we be meeting this as groups by our supplier? We're in Central Hudson may be easy for us to negotiate with some of the chiefs of Central Hudson live in town of where we are. I know them.
Sure.
Yes. Different. Anyway, we from a negotiating purposes, it seems we need to operate together and organize within the structure of our supplier or the territory of our supplier in that context.
You also can go through like NIPA. NIPA has a program, and they're basically charging they make money at it. They charge 12.5% for their consulting work, and I add a 15% margin onto the equipment and stuff. And they do everything for you. So you just enter into a contract with them, and they do it, and that's what you pay. And those are not unreasonable charges. They're actually pretty reasonable. And they can also arrange financing for you. So that's not a bad program. I'm doing it a lot cheaper than that, but through PRISM. But that's because we're not paying profits. We're just covering costs.
Maybe I had some questions I have that are going beyond where your intent to cover today was. But what about a maintenance company? If we own our lights, are there organizations who will maintain them in the future for us on our behalf?
Yes.
And can we select the nature of a lighting in terms of the Cobra heads or whatever, of what we want to use, the quality of the light, the color of the light, and the Kelvin, all that, those aspects of the light, which to me is very important, and it literally affects the quality of life in that community where you live. So,
So
that's the benefit.
The approach that we're taking is we've hired in PRISM, we've hired a single contractor that does all the work throughout the state, and they respond to us. We then work with each community, and we do an individual design based on that community's preferences. So I've got some communities that are doing 4,000 Kelvin, some are doing 3,000 Kelvin. We've got some that are using what's called a Q dialer, so they have a single fixture, they can set it at multiple levels. And so on and so forth. Each community is uniquely designed. We purchase the materials through the state bid, and we supply the materials to the contractor, and we tell him where to put them. So they wind up with a pole-by-pole listing that says, this is what's here now, this is what you put there. And we use this same iPad to keep track of all of that.
And that can vary. You can have, different neighborhoods can have different.
Yep.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, George.
Changing the quality. I do know that Central Hudson is using different fixtures in Red Hook. They've just recently, a few fixtures appeared within the last few weeks that they look like Cobra heads, but in fact they don't operate like a Cobra head. The bulbs stick out. They protrude from the bottom. There are 4 LED bulbs about the size of golf balls that they're independent of the Cobra. They're here and the Cobra's there. And then there's a hole in the top of the Cobra. It doesn't make any sense to me. I've only seen it in the last week or two.
You're talking about the Cree XSB fixture.
Okay.
And
what's the logic of that?
Well, what Cree has done is, in order to cut the cost, they've reduced the amount of aluminum involved in the manufacture of that, and so it's designed to look like a Cobra head, but use a lot less materials.
Mm-hmm. It does, but it doesn't. What purpose does it?
I'll hang around. I can answer.
So we are definitely at the end of our allotted time, and we thank everyone for coming out by phone and computer and in person. We do have a path now, which is we're going to have conference calls by utility territory. Jen is going to be sending more materials, and the options report in full will follow.
Yeah, and if I could just reiterate, please, that this report is preliminary. It has not been peer-reviewed. It's not been formally released by NYSERDA, so it is not for circulation beyond this committee. So
I will tell you that Jen and Nina and Pat have done an enormous amount of work to put this together. I'm really proud of them.
So folks on the phone and by webinar, if you have any questions that we didn't address, please feel free to email me at pat@courtneystrong.com. We'll be posting today's webinar at newyorkstreetlights.com, which is also just a redirect to courtneystrong.com. Thank you all for coming, and we'll be in touch.
I spent 13 years as the DPW director, so, and 26 years in the Army.